Welcome back to another episode of Ag Update. I'm UGA Extension Agent Mark Freeman. In today's episode, we'll take a look at this year's wheat crop, and we'll also take a look at our corn, cotton. We're here in this Pulaski County wheat field. This wheat field was cut sometime last week, and unfortunately here in Pulaski County, the yields this year aren't as good as the yields last year. Last year we had some excellent, exceptional yields. This year I'm hearing reports of anywhere between as low as 35, upwards of about 70 to 75 bushels per acre. Last year we had yields upwards in the almost 100 bushels an acre, or even over that. But a couple of reasons for that was we think it may have just been a little too wet this year. We had a lot of rain early in the spring, and we also had some late season disease issues that popped up that we really couldn't have any control about. Now this field right here was harvested and then strip tilled straight into that wheat stubble with cotton. That's a unique situation we have here in Georgia, where we can harvest our wheat early enough that we can come back behind that and plant a late season cotton plant. So two crops on the same field in 1 year, or a double cropping system is what they call that. Another thing that it's going to do is it's going to allow for a lower thrips population. Now thrips are small insects that affect young cotton plants, and thrips have a hard time distinguishing between a young cotton plant and a plant residue. We don't exactly know why that is, but it has been proven over and over that cotton strip tilled into plant residue has a lot less incidence of thrips injury than conventionally tilled cotton. Now hopefully this field, this cotton plants will emerge in the next week and a half, and they have good luck with this field this summer. I'm here in my Pulaski County cotton variety trial that we had planted a couple weeks ago, and overall the plants look pretty good. Weekly I come out here and I rate each plot for overall plant growth and determine what stage of growth the cotton's in. This field right here is about in a 5 or 6 leaf cotton stage, and that's just the terminology we use when measuring plant growth, cotton plant growth. We just say it's 5 leaf, 6 leaf, which means it has 5 or 6 nodes on that stem. Now each week I'll walk through each plot and I'll rate each plot on overall plant growth, and just use a rating system, 1 through 5 rating system, to compare different varieties to each other. Now when I go through each plot, I don't like to look at the plot plan, so I don't have any bias while I'm in whatever plot or variety that may be. So I take an objective view and I look at each plot, I rate them, I give them a rating between 1 to 5 for overall plant health. Later on, when they get older and start getting into the reproductive stage of life, I'll mark down when they're producing what are called squares, which will eventually turn into flowers or blooms and then into bolls. And we just like to map the plants as they go throughout the year. Now what we're seeing right now in the plots is a lot of thrips injury. Thrips are they're not microscopic, but they're very, very small insects, and they just feed on developing plants. They suck plant juices out of it. It gives the plants a real characteristic symptomology of thrips injury, which is just a crinkled up, hardened leaf. What we recommend is that for early planted cotton, even if you have a seed treatment, for cotton planted in the first half of May, we'll recommend an orthene treatment. Orthene is just an insecticide that's very good on thrips, and the earlier you get that orthene on the plant, the better. Research has shown that if you can get orthene on the plant on actually the first day it's up, you're going to get the best results, and then from there on out it diminishes how effective it is. Now orthene can be mixed with herbicides for a one-time application of herbicide, over-the-top herbicide with your orthene, but it's not recommended, as the orthene can give it a little bit of a burn. Now there are some other chemicals you can use, but the orthene seems to be the safest on leaf burn. Now this particular field right here just had a real timely rain. Moisture is important for all stages of crop development, but it's not as important as once we start getting to the reproductive stage. Once we start getting those squares and bowls, the plants are going to need a lot more water than what they're requiring right now. So hopefully we can get some timely rains on our dryland fields here going into mid-June, late June, and early July, and we can produce a good cotton crop. What has happened in recent years, as we moved away from just spraying Roundup, we had some weeds, particularly pigweed, that became resistant to Roundup. Now we have to rely on some more pre-emerge herbicides. Now these pre-emerge herbicides do a great job on weeds, but they also slow down the growth of the cotton plant. Now, if the cotton is growing a lot slower, then the thrips injury is going to be a lot greater, because the thrips will damage a small young plant a lot more than it will on a larger, faster growing plant. So this plant injury that we're getting from the herbicides is also compounding the thrips that we're seeing. Okay, like I said earlier, thrips injury is very, very distinctive. You know thrips injury when you see it. Now this is actually a pretty healthy looking plant. This is what we want our leaves to look like, nice and smooth. We don't have a whole lot of thrips injury on that. There may be a little on this newest leaf right here, but overall these leaves look pretty good. Now when you compare that to some of these plants right here, these plants got hit really hard with thrips. Even the newest leaf down here has got some pretty bad thrips injury. So this field right here may warrant a orthene treatment. The added thrips is going to slow the plants down even worse than what they're already slowed down. This little guy right here, he's having a rough time. This one as well. These plants will come out of it, but it's just going to slow their development down. They're not going to reach that square stage or that bloom stage faster than this guy is. This guy's going to get there a lot quicker. These were the plants that I planted really early to use as a demonstration for my Cotton Scout school that was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And here, these plants have started to get into the reproductive stage of growth. And we have what we call here our squares. Now there's 2 squares right here. One's a little smaller than the other one. And the smallest one is what we'll call a pinhead square, because it's about the size of a pinhead. And as it gets larger, it'll get to what we call a match head square. And the squares are covered by these leaf-like structures that we call bracts. And the bracts just protect the square from insects and just other environmental issues that we may have. These squares in a few weeks will turn into blooms or flowers, which then pollinate and will eventually become a bowl. So from here to here, about a week's difference, and in a couple more weeks we're going to have some flowers, and those flowers will eventually become cotton. Well, here lately the corn has really taken off. Just a couple of weeks ago, the last show, most of the corn was about maybe chest high, and now here 2 weeks later it's really taken off. It's at least a foot or 2 foot taller than myself. So we had a lot of growth the last couple of weeks. We've gone from what we call the tassel stage, which is the last vegetative stage of plant growth, into what we call the silk stage. So now we have the silks at the top of the plants. You can see here we've got a lot of pollen shed, and the actual silk sits on top of the corn husk itself and catches that pollen. So this is the first stage of reproduction, where we try to get those kernels pollinated, get them filled out. Now that we're into this silk stage, it's really important to irrigate our corn. This is when the corn plant needs most of its water. It's really going to try to fill out those kernels that are on the corn husk itself. Now down in South Georgia, they found a couple of diseases that we need to continually scout for throughout the year, but they've confirmed that they have northern corn leaf blight, northern corn leaf spot, and they've also confirmed southern rust. So they're usually a few weeks ahead of us here in Middle Georgia, but we need to continually scout for diseases, scout the fields, and just every week continue to try to find something. Insects are becoming a problem as well. I've seen some corn earworms. I'll show you some damage in a second, and I've seen also a lot of stink bugs. The stink bugs I've seen this year are primarily browns. The winter that we had this year probably killed off a lot of our green and southern green stink bugs, as they can't take as much cold weather as the browns can. But we need to continue to scout fields for insect pressure and diseases, and get this corn through this silk stage and get that good yield. Corn earworms primarily aren't a major issue until a little bit later on in the corn life cycle, but it's something that we need to scout for. Now, stink bugs can be a problem right now, and primarily in Pulaski County I've seen nothing but brown stink bugs, and the reason for this is probably because the cold winter that we had killed off a lot of our green and our southern green stink bugs. So right now brown stink bugs are primarily an issue over green stink bugs, but we need to continue to scout for them and look for the insects while we're scouting. Okay, so these plants right here have been damaged by some type of worm. I looked for the worms pretty hard and I couldn't find them. More than likely it was a fall armyworm, and after the worms get a certain size, about a week old, they get about an inch long, and then they get off the plant and they burrow into the ground where they pupate, and they'll become a moth later. But the damage that a fall armyworm or corn earworm or tobacco budworm does is going to be like this. Typically fall armyworms are more of a foliage feeder, and fall armyworm and corn earworm are a fruit eater, so they're going to eat the actual corn husks themselves. But this could have been corn earworm as well, but more than likely it was fall armyworm. Now, our stink bugs, they're a piercing, sucking insect, so they have a mouth part that they'll stick into the plant. On these small plants, it would be right where the growing point is, and they're going to inject an enzyme and then suck that enzyme back up, and that's how they feed. So they're going to leave an entirely different damage than what a worm would. And I was just able to find a brown stink bug just a minute ago, so this field does have brown stink bugs in it. But two different kinds of insects are going to cause two different kinds of injury. So this is our caterpillar injury right here, and stink bug injury really wouldn't be visible until later on. Well, just a second ago I found a brown stink bug in this field, so this field does have some stink bug pressure. It's something he's going to want to look for week in and week out to determine if there's enough stink bugs that he knows he wants to spray or not. A lot of times stink bugs don't really warrant a spray in corn unless they're really high populations, so it's something he's just going to have to keep his eye on in the next few weeks. Peanuts seem to be coming along just fine in Pulaski County. This field right here was planted about a month ago, and right about now is the time for our early post applications for weed control. Now, this field had a lot of what we call nut grass, which is actually a nut sedge. Nut grass can be hard to kill sometimes because it's got some underground tubers that it can regrow back from. But one of the more popular herbicide applications here is a herbicide called gramoxone mixed with something called basagran. Now, gramoxone is a contact herbicide, but gramoxone and basagran, when mixed together, are antagonists of each other, and that antagonism will actually protect the peanut plants more than it will protect the weeds. So the peanut plants can actually take a lot of defoliation. So when we spray that gramoxone over the peanut plants, we do get some foliar burn on the plants, but that's only cosmetic. There's no decrease in yield from that. But we do get a great weed control with it. So it's one of those post-applicated herbicides that we're using. Another herbicide that we can mix in there is 2,4-DB, and 2,4-DB is safe on peanuts for 2 applications per year. When we also get into this time period, this is the time for our first application of fungicide. So So a lot of people will try to decrease the amount of time they have to be in the field and try to tank mix a lot of things together. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is that when we tank mix more than typically 3 different chemicals together, and mainly when we put fungicides in with our herbicides, we're seeing increased leaf burn. Leaf burn, I mean, we want to decrease leaf burn as much as possible. We're already going to get some burn with the herbicides, so just increasing that burn isn't something we want to do. Now, we do have some herbicide fungicide mix guides at the extension office that we can give you, but we can never be sure exactly what's going to happen. There's over 24,000 combinations of different chemicals that we can use. That includes all our fungicides, all our herbicides, surfactants, and crop oils. There's over 24,000 of those combinations. So it's very, very, very hard to tell what's going to happen when you combine different chemicals together. Another thing to remember is just the local climate that's going on in the field at that particular time. So you may be spraying in the morning, there's water on the leaves, more humidity, but less temperature. But you know, we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe spraying the next day, we don't have the same humidity levels. We got higher temperatures, lower temperatures. There's really no way to know exactly what's going to happen when we start mixing all those chemicals together. So UGA recommends that we don't mix chemicals that we don't know what's going to happen. Usually a 3-way mixture is about as high of a combination as we need. Getting into 4, 5, and even 6-way mixtures, you're really taking a gamble on what's going to happen. You may get a lot more plant injury than what we need. And also with gramoxone, gramoxone is not labeled on flowering peanuts, so we need to get that post-application out before we start seeing flowers. What will happen there is it'll knock those flowers off of the plant, and those flowers would potentially have turned into pegs and into peanuts. So you're decreasing your yield when you spray gramoxone after flowering. So this right here shows some of the classic injury from gramoxone. Gramoxone is going to injure the plant, but it's going to injure the weeds a lot more than it's going to injure the peanuts. Peanuts can actually take a lot of foliar injury and still make a great crop. So the gramoxone and Basicram mixture is gonna burn these leaves a little bit. We're gonna get something called a yellow flash, where the plants turn really yellow for a day or two, but they'll come right back out of it and turn green. Here we have some flowers that have just come out. So this was sprayed before it was flowering, but these flowers here are gonna pollinate and then turn into pegs and go underground and produce peanuts. But once again, this is a gramoxone injury. It's nothing to worry about. The plant will come out of it, as the peanuts can take a lot of foliar injury.
All right, Mark, we have 3 questions today. The first is from Jeremy. How much should I water my lawn?
Well, there's no perfect answer to that. But generally in Central Georgia and South Georgia, 1 inch per week is going to be adequate for our lawns. Now there's better ways of managing your irrigation. The best way would probably be not to irrigate until it's absolutely needed. And we know it's needed when we get what we call blueprinting or footprinting. So the grass will actually turn slightly a bluish color, and you can see exactly where you stepped after you stepped on the grass. Now what this does, that's the first stages of drought stress for the plant. And when we stress the plants just a little bit like that, we can actually get those roots to grow down deeper into the soil profile, and that will just make an overall healthier plant. So as soon as you see that footprinting starting to happen is when you need to water. But if you wanted to just put it on a schedule, I would say about 1 inch a week would be adequate. Maybe bump it up to about 1.25 inches once we get into temperatures over 100 degrees for extended times. But I also would recommend to put all of that water out in one day. So when we put more water out in one application, we're going to get that water deeper into the soil profile, and that's going to get those roots a lot deeper as well. If you were to break up that 1 inch per week over 5 days and only spray 2/10 of an inch each time. You're only going to be wetting the top surface of the soil, and the roots of the grass plants aren't going to get real deep, so it's going to be susceptible to a lot more insects and drought pressure if we come into a drought.
Our second question is from Kelly. How do I get rid of Smilax?
Well, Smilax is a vine that grows in our flower beds and up our houses and stuff as well. And it's really hard to control because it comes from tubers. So these tubers are underground. They're just like a potato, and they store carbohydrates in these tubers. So we can pull the plant up, and get the ground clean. And then in a couple days, those tubers are going to send new stems back up. So it's really hard to control by just pulling it. We can use a systemic herbicide, and a systemic herbicide is one that travels within the plant. So something like Roundup would probably be a good option for this, but it's still going to take multiple applications just because it's going to keep coming back from tubers. So probably the best option would be pull it up, and when it comes back again, maybe spray it with Roundup. When those leaves are nice and tender, we get a lot better translocation through the plant when we spray it on tender leaves. And try to get that Roundup to translocate down into those tubers and hopefully kill the tubers. It's probably going to take more than one application of Roundup, and would definitely take more than one just pulling and cleaning of the ground surface. That's a pretty tough weed to kill, but with those continued applications, we can probably get rid of it.
From Richard, we have this question. How do I get fleas out of my backyard?
Okay, well, fleas can be pretty easy to control. One thing we need to do is make sure that we cut our grass and our vegetation back. Tall grass and real leafy vegetation areas are going to give the fleas a lot of places to hide. We also need to make sure we treat our animals with flea prevention insecticides once a month. But we can also control them with insecticides. Any kind of insecticide that you get at Ace Hardware, something like bifenthrin or 7 are going to be great options. We got to make sure that we get really good control. So if it's a liquid, you're going to want to walk slow and make sure you're getting all that liquid, good coverage on the vegetation. And then we're also going to have to come back about 7 to 10 days later. What that's going to do is the eggs that were there when we sprayed the first time, they're going to hatch. And then within 7 to 10 days, we come back and spray those guys again. And we may even want to do a third application just to make sure we get the entire population. Well, hopefully you can guess that this week's pest of the week was Bahia grass. Bahia grass can be a huge nuisance for people's lawns. It has a characteristic Y seed head, and those seed heads can actually come back within just a couple days of being mowed. If it weren't for those seed heads, Bahia grass would actually be a great turf grass because it holds up well to traffic. You can park your car on it constantly and it'll come right back. It's really hard to kill in Bermuda grass, especially if you don't have a pesticide license. It's very similar to Bermuda grass, so most of the herbicides that we have that would kill it would also kill your Bermuda grass, so it's really hard to kill. But if you do happen to have a pesticide license, or somebody takes care of your lawn that does have a pesticide license, a herbicide called metsulfuron, which is sold as Manor, is a good herbicide to control Bahia grass. It has excellent control on the Bahia grass itself and doesn't injure your Bermuda grass. So that's about the only option we have, and like I said, you have to have a pesticide license to buy that. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Ag Update. I'm UGA Extension Agent Mark Freeman, and be sure to tune in next time for the latest in Middle Georgia agriculture.